you really become something quite special.
Yes.
I think at time of my death, I will remember you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to all of you. May I request, as many of you as are not uncomfortable being seen, to put on your cameras so we can see. This is a discussion. I'm not here to deliver a lecture. I'm really no one special. I've just had the great privilege of being student of the Dalai Lama, and I want to emphasize student. I've not really achieved very much. So, at different stages in our life, I think all of us here are students, and it has been such a great privilege, watching this film with the two great human beings. You often wish, or I often wish, that I could emulate a synthesis of both of them. And this is a discussion, so we really look forward to, listening to you and your questions and what you have to say and what you have to ask and what you understood from the film. Let me just interrupt again and say, please put on your cameras. This is a discussion so that we can all, see each other and engage with each other. And so I just wanted to say that when I saw the film, its objective had really been served, because I felt so joyous, and it's wonderful to feel joy when you see a film about joy. So it wasn't a preachy film which just told me what I should do to be happy, but it just made me happy by what the film was, and the people in the film. Yes, and the word that microphones muted so that we don't pick up noise. And so what I really came away from was that joy is not an escape from suffering, and that the self-centeredness breeds suffering. But most of all, and this was not entirely, not just watching the film and being joyous, was something about me, but the fact that two people from such diverse traditions and backgrounds could experience so much joy together and share it was a critical value, and something that all need to learn from, not just all of us here sharing these moments this precious afternoon, but I think around the world. I mean, in our country, in virtually every part of the world, where there is so much fragmentation and so much division between people and between faiths. I mean, this is happening in so many countries, and without getting into the politics of it, that surely there must be some ways and some mechanisms that we can live in harmony together, and not just tolerate each other, but as Bishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness do and have demonstrated, is to celebrate each other despite their differences. And so this is not just something that we're talking about what nations and the world should do, but if the world is a happier place and there is less conflict and division between people around the world, then those of us who share the world with each other will inevitably be happier people. So I'm just going to sort of throw the floor open to all of you here, and if you have a reflection or a comment or a question, please. I don't know how you do this. I'm going to ask my colleague Shilpi to explain, and she's going to coordinate this as to how we have more than 200 people, and so how you identify your interest in asking a question or making a a comment, and then we will invite you and put the spotlight on you. Okay, Shilpi, how are we going to do this?
Thank you so much, sir. And we are so grateful and so thrilled to have students from so many different universities and colleges across India and Sri Lanka joining us live in this moment. We have 232 participants and we're so thrilled. We imagine the next 1 hour to be a very interactive and vibrant discussion between all of us and Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra. So to begin with, I was hoping if we can invite everyone to please switch on your video cameras if you're comfortable, and to please keep yourself muted till you're called on to speak. And perhaps we can start with a prompt where all of you have seen the film Mission Joy, and if we can have some people volunteer to share with us any one thing that they learn from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and any one thing that they learned from Archbishop Desmond Tutu after watching the film. And I'll request you to either raise your hands or put in a message in the chat box so we can call on you individually to speak and share with us. We have Harini, who's raised her hand. Harini, can you please introduce yourself and share?
Good afternoon, everybody, and my fellow peers. So I'm Harini Veerasinghe. I am from the Arts Faculty of the University of Colombo in Sri Lanka. I hope I'm audible. Like there's a bit of bad weather here. So
You're perfectly audible. Please carry on.
Thank you, sir. So when I watched this film, it was truly one of those rare pieces of film that actually reached out to me, because to be honest, let's be honest, I'm a very pessimistic person, and I was not in the mood for another, one of those cheesy motivational videos, motivational documentaries with nonsensical droning. And to be honest, joy these days is something that is very, very difficult to come about in Sri Lanka, with millions of us despairing on whether or not we're able to even put one meal at the table, to get that few liters of petrol that has become a luxury of sorts these days. And for us youth who are dreading at what the future is actually, what the future will be for us. And I didn't want to get my hopes up, but then I was just able to, just shut down that very pessimistic voice of mine and, give this a shot. And I am 1 gazillion% glad that I gave this a shot, because this, it was one of those rare moments where a person who is no longer physically with us was able to, just reach across this virtual platform and, just gently blow away my worries, my stress, my resentment at the current situation, and instill in me hope and faith that there is still light and that we can find joy. And it is truly remarkable in how His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu was, with almost stubborn defiance, sought to maintain this very mischievous and playful spirit despite the difficult circumstances. And there's laughter, there's teasing, and there is more importantly, deep respect and admiration towards each other throughout this film. And like you mentioned, it does not matter whether if one is Christian and one is a Buddhist. What they share is this universal message to every human being, a call for finding joy through kindness, compassion, and forgiveness, however difficult the circumstances may be. And one of the lessons that hit me in the heart is this method of cognitive reforming, where you change, where you change the way you look at the world, and by that you can see that it's just not only it's not only black. There's also very, very different shades when it comes to life, different shades when it comes to life, and that joy is not a sense of only, it is not only a sense of feeling, but also a way of life. And it was honestly so beautiful and inspiring to see how these two people of very different backgrounds were so loving and caring towards one another, and was able to simply laugh about their differences. And this honestly touched my heart and soul in a very happy and peaceful manner, and filling it with joy, which I have not honestly felt in a very, 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 very long time.
Thank you. Thank you, Arini. I just want to pick up on a very, very important thing that you have implicitly flagged. And that is that how can you experience joy when so many people around you are suffering?
I think it's just as Desmond Tutu, apologies, as his Holiness is as the late Archbishop said, it's it's by looking at the other side of the story, because whilst we're seeing people queues of people, people staying in the queues just to get that liter of petrol, you also see people who come and give drinks, give them food, and make sure that everybody's morale is up. Because you see, because I live close to a petrol station, and then at one point there was this this small mock concert that was going on, where people were singing and dancing. And so there are moments there are there are moments in this crisis where despite the dark times, there is still light. And I really admire our people and how they are able to keep their heads up despite all the challenges that are being leveled at them. And that is something I really admire, how compassionate our people are.
Okay, I'm just going to take that a little further for you, and I'm going to, we want to get in as many people as we can. So thank you, Arnie. That's a perfect lead in for us, because you have flagged many points. But I would urge all of you, as you come into, sort of just focus on one particular aspect, so more of you can participate. But I just want to delve on this idea that about joy, and while other people are suffering, and to seeing the positive aspect of it. And I think that the challenge there is that even as we look at the positive aspect of it, we cannot but feel empathy and feel the other person's pain. And I think that one of the challenges that we face today is the use of words like happiness and joy and what have you, and how we understand happiness, and we just understand happiness or joy as the absence of suffering. And what it really is, this is what comes up in the film, that both these people who experienced so much suffering themselves and were witness to so much suffering. Now that didn't mean that when they were experiencing other people's suffering, that they were busy being joyous and laughing and sharing jokes with each other while people were suffering. And so actually what, this is always a challenge with vocabulary. And since I know that, you also come from a Buddhist country. And so what the Buddha really said was, freedom from dukkha, or unsatisfactoriness. And so it really is to, understand and empathize with the pain and suffering of the other, but not so much that it incapacitates you from responding to doing something to help them. And hence the whole, the emphasis in much of the film is on compassion and to move away from self-centeredness. So, we shouldn't imagine that, to experience joy is an eternal, constant state of being in, I don't know what, in some kind of bliss, even as people around us, are suffering. So what it does really is it changes our relationship to our suffering and the suffering of others, to a more proactive one, into a strategy, an approach, a philosophy of working to alleviate it, both for ourselves and for others. And alleviate it for ourselves is not a selfish act, it's actually an act of altruism. Because if we can diminish our own obsession with the self, it's the I, me, mind that suffers, we are better able to help others. And we all know that when we, watch, other people happy, and, we are able to have resolved our issues of jealousy and grasping, then that brings us joy and happiness. And exactly as Harini said, that, she thought that this would be, a film preaching, in a goody-goody way, preaching virtue. But I think that what it was trying to demonstrate was that it is, in a sense, being wisely selfish. That, of course, it helps you, but in the process, it also impacts and transforms other people. Okay, so let's move on to another comment question, and just try and keep it to one point, and be brief, so that we can embrace as many people as possible in the hour that we have. Okay, let's go.
Can I invite Karthik to go next?
Yes.
And as Karthik shares his reflections briefly with us, I'll also encourage anybody else who has questions, reflections, to please share them in the chat box. And as time permits, we'll try to engage with as many as we can. Karthik, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. I hope all of you are happy and in good health. It's great to see all of you. So I'm Karthik Kumar Pathak. I'm in second year of my graduation in political science in MIT WPU from Pune. Well, the movie was sanguine for me. In one word, it was sanguine, it was cheerful. And while listening to His Holiness Dalai Lama, I was inspired, to say the least. I felt a very deep and profound connection with both these noble people. The life of the Dalai Lama was emotional for me. Being thrown out of your own country is one of the most heartbreaking things that can happen to a human. Despite that, he did not develop any kind of hate in himself for the people who acted against him. This quality is rare in today's world. And the quality to not develop hate, the quality to not reply or respond to hate, but by love, the quality to show compassion to everybody around us. He was so casual, he was so childish and random, but content, ethics-driven, and inspirational at the same time. Desmond Tutu. If I have to describe Desmond Tutu in one word, it would be very simply, it would be strong. His life from birth was full of hurdles and struggles, from health scares like, as he mentioned in the movie, from polio to tuberculosis, to fighting the mighty African orthodoxy. He has shown immense strength in his character. His fight against apartheid was very similar to our or India's fight against the colonialism. And the most prominent aspect and the quality of it was nonviolence. He reassured the importance of nonviolence in our struggles against the injustice. And as our great Mahatma Gandhi said, that love is one of the mightiest weapons ever devised by humankind. So his protest against apartheid, discrimination, and in support of LGBT rights was equating that. The relationship between them was very cheerful, very refreshing, but at the same time, very respectful. it was very special to see two people who are diagonally opposite from each other, from life to their struggles to how they carry forward their character, yet sharing the same set of values. It was a movie for me that reminded us the immense possibility of coexistence that we as a people of this globe have. So it was great watching the movie.
Thank you,
And I
Karthik.
feel
Thank
you so much.
I'm going to keep urging you to stay with the one point. I mean,
Yes, sir.
all of what you said is very interesting and extremely significant. But I think it'd be much more wonderful if a lot more people could make brief points. Yeah. So please try and be
Sure,
brief,
sir.
one or two inch. I think there are two very important issues that you flagged, and I did want to reflect on this because we did also get the comments from a number of you, and so I'm going to take a few minutes because it's very crucial. What is the basis of people from two diverse belief systems achieving not just mutuality and respect, but celebrating each other? So unfortunately, in India, we talk about unity in diversity or religious tolerance. But what we have witnessed here is the celebration of diversity. So it is not enough that we are unified, and nor is it enough that we are tolerant. We need to celebrate each other and celebrate diversity, and only then will we as a species, not just as a people, the human species, live in peace and harmony with each other and nurture each other. And what is the basis of that? And the basis of that is the recognition, and this is something that the Dalai Lama often talks about, is the recognition that just as each one of us needs a different physical diet, so if you're diabetic, you have a particular diet. If you live in the mountains, you have a particular diet. If you live in the cold climate of Tibet, you have a different diet. If you live in southern India, you have a different diet. Sometimes you use a lot of spices because the climate or the kind of food needs those spices to be easily digested. And some doctors will tell you that not only does it ease digestion, but it helps you release the enzymes that will combat the bacteria. So basically, each one of us needs a different physical diet for our physical health. So similarly, each one of us, depending on our mental disposition, the kind of human beings we are, we need a different mental diet. So if we recognize different traditions as representing or embodying different mental diets. So for example, if Islam was born in the Middle East at a particular time and place where there was a shortage of water, where women, where men were out in conflict and the number of men were diminishing, there was a different relationship between men and women emerged at that time in history. And similarly, for example, the Buddha taught that you should not eat meat. But if you were a wandering monk and you were begging for food, then you ate what you were given. So you didn't go around killing animals for food, but if meat was given to you, with a good motivation by somebody who was looking after the monks, and you were begging for it, then you were allowed to eat it. So there's a whole range, and I too will try and be brief, of possibilities here for us to understand that faiths, religions, practices emerged in social contexts which were enabling and nurturing. And very often the challenge for faiths is that how do they remain relevant by adapting to changing external environments? And the genius of Bishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama has been their ability to, in a sense, keep fine-tuning their traditions and faiths in order to remain sensitive and responsive to the external realities. So when the world was relatively isolated, faiths didn't have to worry too much about their relationship with other faiths. I mean, it was, when the invasion started, and there was an occupying force, and there was there was a local community. What was the relationship between them? Now it is much more intimate and urgent with modern technology and what have you. So it was this idea that each one of us needs a different mental diet, just as we need a different physical diet. And if you can just accept a different tradition as a different mental diet that someone finds useful and enabling them to live a happy, harmonious life, and that we should be accepting of it. And the second very crucial, let me just put my camera on. Yes. And the second different emerging truth, in a sense, from modern science has been that there is no singular reality. Reality today, quantum physics, quantum mechanics will tell us, is dependent on the observer. So even our understanding of reality now needs to embrace the fact that other people's reality is different. And so it doesn't mean that my reality is final and absolute, and the others is somehow misplaced and hostile to mine because it is different. So what we have seen with these two great teachers is there is a very fundamental difference in their belief system. It's really fundamental in the sense that Buddhism does not believe in a creator God, and Christianity does. Now you can squabble about it till doomsday that does God exist? Does the creator God does not exist? It doesn't matter. If praying to a creator or worshiping a creator God works for you and makes you a better, happier, compassionate being, so be it. And if not believing in it, in this, achieves something for you, so be it. Why should we be envious or jealous or competitive that my belief system is superior to yours? And that is the basis, because this question keeps has come up in both what both the people who spoke and in what we have received from you. And the third one is really this very important issue of the relationship with the enemy. And so here both, whether we look at Gandhi, who inspired His Holiness enormously, and I know also the Bishop Desmond Tutu, who believed in the power of nonviolence. And the power of nonviolence was basically a fundamental respect for the perspective of the enemy while disagreeing with the enemy. So even then, it was not sought to diminish the enemy as evil per se, but so, and this is what Christianity says. I mean, don't hate the enemy, hate his actions or protest his actions, and keep the individual intact. And here again, I remember when I went up to Dharamsala in the early 80s, I was so moved and impacted by the fact that the Tibetan monks used to start their daily prayers saying that, may the veils of ignorance lift from the Chinese, because they felt that the Chinese were acting against the Tibetans out of ignorance. So the ability to respect the enemy, that does not mean, and this was not Gandhi's nonviolence, and it is not the Buddha's or His Holiness or the Bishop Desmond Tutu's embracing of the enemy, that you allow the enemy to blindly walk over you. And it's not, it doesn't mean that you say, yeah, come, beat me up, and I will be a pacifist. Okay, so let's have the next question. And please keep it brief and make, 1 point. We're already halfway through, time has flown. Okay.
Savitri, can I invite you to go next?
Yes, thank you very much. So I think one of the key themes that I actually was, that was highlighted to me was finding inner peace and making life meaningful, and also connecting with others and sharing joy through connecting with others. That was like the gist that actually resonated with me throughout this movie. So I'd actually like to point out one thing that actually resonated more with me, that is the concept where it meant like cognitive reframing, changing the way you see the world, changing the angle that you look at something. So when Mr. Rajiv also mentioned that, we have to think in terms of realities of other people as well, I think that could be, a change, that could be a change that we all need, that we need to change the way we look at certain things, change the angle, look into the realities of others. In that way, we can, this reframing, as the quoting from the movie, this reframing can liberate us in another way. So, making life meaningful throughout the little time that we live on this world. And also, that's the gist that I got from the movie. So this cognitive reframing, actually, that certain concept was left with me. That's one of the main things that got highlighted to me throughout the movie. And also, I'd like to point out something what Dr. Richard was mentioning in the movie. That was, well-being is a skill, that we don't get it automatically. You have to nurture it. You have to nurture your mind. You have to keep at it. You have to put effort, and then you will achieve well-being. So those are the few things.
Thank you, Savitri. This is, I mean, it's so wonderful that all of you are picking up on such important key points. So it is then exactly as you said that cognitive reframing. And I think that what we're really talking about here is not merely reframing cognition, but going right down to changing the biochemistry of our brain so that our deepest reflexive responses are changed. And, we'll come to that, later, perhaps with some other question. And what is the goal? The goal is compassion. And why is it compassion? It is compassion because we suffer, because we are so obsessed with ourselves. So if we can, through whatever techniques and practices, soften the sense of ourselves and our obsession with ourselves, we will experience less suffering. Now, what Richie Davidson is pointing to, that it is possible to change our deepest reflexive responses. So it's not merely an intellectual process. And that is really the great achievement of our shared civilizational heritage, but also the techniques. When you look at the idea of compassion, it is at the core of Christianity, as it is at the core of Buddhism, and as it is at the core of most traditions. That you stop thinking about yourself, and whether it is the divine that you're thinking of, or you're thinking of other people. That is what is going to ease your sense of suffering. Now, Bishop Desmond Tutu at one point says, you have to train your mind like you train your muscles almost. And so it often is, His Holiness will often say, and Desmond Tutu has reaffirmed this, is that, we spend so much of our time training ourselves, to look pretty or to look handsome, to be able to, retrain our bodies so that they're perfectly contoured, to look at, whether we can paint our nails so that people will notice them. And that includes toenails, that people will look at our feet, to decide how attractive we are. So in a sense, there is a misplaced sense of priority. So we'll invest time in training ourselves for our careers, our professions, but we will not find time to train our minds. And it is our minds that filter and process experience. So what you're seeing with the Desmond Tutu and His Holiness is, they are at the peak of, this process of having trained their minds in order to be who they are and to interact with each other. And these techniques, depending on your mental disposition, are available to us. And that is what the film is, amongst the many things it's saying to us, it is reassuring us that not only do we see examples of people who manifest and embody it, but it also tells us that this is achievable by all of us provided we make the effort. And that's why this whole emphasis that, there's this wonderful conversation that they have as to whether suffering is necessary and whether suffering is useful. Now, that's something we very rarely are able to think about, and to think that a challenge, an obstacle, or suffering is really an opportunity for us to learn, grow, and evolve. And I thought that was another amazing way of looking at the challenges that we face as opportunities to train ourselves. And time permitting, we can talk about what some of these training exercises or trainings are. And just again, a little brief aside, that what the Dalai Lama would say, and Desmond Tutu is saying, is that if it is your mental disposition that you need a creator God that you can turn to for support, and through prayer to invoke their blessings and grace and teachings, then that is what works for you. In Buddhism, if you are, the Buddhism is supposed to be is agnostic. It looks at more sort of techniques of training the mind, such as meditation and contemplation. Then that is what is appropriate for you, and you practice that. So it is not that there is only one particular training for the mind, just like when you want to train your body, you can be doing pilates, you can be doing weightlifting. There is 1,000 different ways of training your body, or as is, training yourself for a profession. And similarly, there is a huge diversity of ways in which you can train the mind. Okay, next question. Remember, brief, to the point. All right.
We have Mithali who's raised her hand. Mithali, please share with us.
I hope everyone is doing okay and I'm audible to everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the most profound messages that His Holiness Dalai Lama has shared with us is that the ultimate source of a meaningful life is within ourselves. So even at his darkest times, when he was very young age, when he was lonely, he invested that time in growth, in helping out others, in learning about, in investing his time in learning and learning through experiences of science and other things. So that's one of the most biggest learnings that I've got through the whole movie.
Thank you, Mithali. It's interesting that that while the Dalai Lama is considered, and he's always sort of dismissive of it, is considered the 14th incarnation of the tradition of the Dalai Lamas, and an incarnation of the Buddha aspect of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. Which means that he's an incarnate Buddha, but that does not imply that he was born with all of this. And he says that he found the learning and the training maybe somewhat easier in terms of the scriptures and the texts. And he will still say in his Skanda that he said he always, for many, many, many years, he struggled with anger. And he found that through years of practice, he was able to dilute this anger with compassion as an antidote, so that now he can still get angry, but the anger very quickly dissipates. And so the other thing, what this tells us is several things. One, of course, is the deep humility that someone who is on the pedestal of being an incarnate Buddha is willing to acknowledge his own struggles in training his mind. So, we need to recognize that training our minds is a journey. There's no eureka moment. And sometimes we think there is a eureka moment because we've seen a film or we've heard a brilliant talk and we are convinced that this is the solution and we have got it. But it goes out of the window, because just like, if you're doing exercise, you have to keep repeating it in order to strengthen the muscle or to lose weight, which I need to do, is that similarly, you have to keep training the mind repeatedly. And that is, this question has come up about meditation. So what is meditation? Meditation is basically giving our minds consciously a different mental diet. So by repeating certain thoughts and ideas, this happens in prayer, when you keep praying to divinity or your deity or Jesus, you keep visualizing Jesus, you keep repeating a prayer and repeating, till it is firmly embedded in your consciousness. So what we really need to recognize, watching these people, that there is no instant nirvana or instant enlightenment or an instant merging with the Creator God. It's hard work, just as everything else is hard work. And we have to be willing to invest that time, energy, and motivation. Okay, next question.
So before I call on one of the students to share, there are also questions that are being shared in the chat box,
Okay.
Which is connected to what you were sharing and what Mitali just asked.
Mhm.
So this is a combination of questions which have been asked by Shweta, Arshad, and Bhaskar.
Mhm.
They're asking, His Holiness says, we should work for peace in our hearts, even as we work for peace in the world. How can we develop and train our hearts and minds? Besides meditation, please share some other techniques.
Well, the fundamental technique is meditation. There's no getting away from it. But what happens sometimes is not sometimes. What happens too is that if the mind is not prepared to achieve equanimity, you can't just sit down and say, I am now going to start practicing training the mind. So we know that there is a relationship between mind, body, and action. And it is sometimes, even very visible. So, I'm enjoying talking to you and learning to you, and I'm feeling good. But if I was having a bad morning and I was feeling depressed, my whole physiology would change and I'd be like this. Now, just by the very act of sitting like, straightening myself up or talking to you, wonderful people, and engaging in physical actions and external action, it also begins to have an impact on my mind. So sometimes we don't always have to wait for the internal stimulus to arrive in our minds to feel compassionate. If we can, even if it is mechanically, engage in altruistic action, it will begin to impact our minds. And unfortunately, one of the many the sort of the practices that are being touted today is, say, yoga, and yoga is being put out purely as a mechanism to feel healthy and to solve physical problems. But yoga, when appropriately done, impacts your mind. And how does it impact the mind? Just as I told you. So what each posture does is, so if I do, a shavasana, anyway, I won't go to the details of yoga. So each yogic asana is a particular posture that then impacts my mind by repeating it. But that's not enough, because unless we also do meditation, that it can increase the consciousness of the body. And so what's really happening is that when we are investing so much money in beautifying ourselves, we think that by appearing physically attractive to ourselves, we will somehow become attractive to other people. And if it was so simple and if it was so absolute, then we would all agree. So it is sometimes, what is the antidote to attachment? And if you begin to reflect on someone that we're attached to, then you'd wonder if that person is really as beautiful and wonderful as I think it is. Then everybody should think so. But everybody doesn't think so. It's my perspective, and that's okay. I'm not arguing against that. But when it becomes an obsession, then you know that there is a problem. So similarly, we can mimic acts of compassion, and so that it induces in us the feeling of compassion. And then there are other sort of things which are, part of popular, popular experience, is that exercise is good for you, because we know now that when you're exercising, your mind moves away from yourself into exercising. And having said that, I should, give you the other approach, which is from the Hindu tradition, that basically there are four archetypes, and this is something that is common to all the Eastern traditions. And so you have four different archetypes of mental disposition. So you have like bhakti yoga, which means that people who are very emotional people can use bhakti, which means devotion to God. And then you have karma yoga, which is the path of action. So you can be, through action, through selfless action, you are able to heal yourself and to become and affect your reflexive responses. And then you have Jnana Yoga, which is through knowledge. And then, of course, you have Raj Yoga, which is meditation and the other practices. So depending on your mental disposition, it is important and useful to be able to follow that as your mechanism to diminish and soften the self. But ultimately, it does come back to impacting the mind, and there is no escaping that. All right.
I'd like to now invite Ara. Ara is joining us from the University of Colombo.
Yes, Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, loud.
Yeah. So one thing that I found really impressive is that, we in general, when we go through a lot of struggle, when we have a lot of grief in life, we lose compassion at some point. We become very emotional, very angry. We try to control the way we react. We don't show our happy selves outside. And also both of them being very spiritual people have sort of managed to, what do you say? They are still very happy, mischievous people, and they haven't sort of tried to portray themselves as, very serious characters, because usually spirituality in a lot of places, people try to sort of show themselves as very serious, very, what do you say? The word bhakti is, sort of something related to seriousness. So I found that very impressive. The fact that they've, sort of, changed our perspectives on how spiritual people should carry themselves.
Well, thank you. I think that's how do I put this? I see a strand, and I think this is one of the challenges of the diversity of cultures, and that is that. I think derived from the American Constitution, which makes happiness a right. We have begun to, and I flagged this before, and I just want to reaffirm that flag, the idea or the aspiration that we can somehow always be happy, or that we can somehow always be joyous. And I can, I haven't spent that much time with Bishop Desmond Tutu, but I certainly have with His Holiness. And, someone who is in pain and suffering comes to the Dalai Lama. He is not happy. He cannot be happy. But what is that he feels the other person's suffering as his own at that time. And that is what gives him the empathetic connect with other people's suffering. And also that, and this comes up in the film, that suffering is a part of the human condition. We cannot escape suffering and live in eternal good humor. All that we can do is that we can change our relationship to suffering, and our own and that of others, and recover more quickly from that to be able to next move on to sharing joy and happiness with other people as they unfold. So we have to give up this fantasy. And in that sense, the film may be a little, it's not actually misleading, because, there are some very poignant moments, when His Holiness says, well, when I'm dying, I will think of you. So just look at his relationship with Desmond Tutu and with dying, and which is something that we usually want to shun and not think about. So it is the acceptance of the true nature of reality that we're going to die, that people we love are going to die, and we will experience grief and sorrow when they die, and that's okay. So we have to, we have, I mean, if you look at the other sort of the punctuation points in the film, this is what so powerfully emerges, that there are moments of solemnity, there are moments of laughter, there are moments of almost silly humor like children. And all of them juxtaposed to create these, remarkable people. And above all, we relate to them because of their quality of empathy with us and with other people. So we're not in some isolated, blissed out, state of eternal happiness and joy. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to invite Afia. Afia Bhatt is joining us from Kashmir University.
Hello, good afternoon, one and all. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, audible but not seen.
Okay, I'm so sorry. As you know that whenever you talk about Kashmir, internet connectivity is always an issue. I'm so sorry for that.
Oh, don't be sorry. Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
Sir, actually, as far as this film is concerned, there are so many enlightened messages which every person can easily relate. But as far as my experience is concerned, the major takeaway for me was like, we can see every individual as a part of a universal human family. That was a very profound message if everybody can understand that. And there was one more highlighted point, that was happiness is possible when we all can start with our own self. So as a teacher, as a future teacher, I can say that, will you please suggest me how I can make my students understand such a profound message, that if you want to give yourself an inner happiness or peace or joy, whatever positive word you can relate with this thing, that is more than a set of passing feelings, and that its essence is not attached to the outside world. Whether there is their degrees, there is their houses or cars, whatever materialistic aspect we can say. Thank you so much.
Gosh, you're asking me to do what I am struggling with myself, and I would dearly love to achieve all the things that you're talking about myself. But having said that, let me tell you the kind of things I am told I should be doing and don't always succeed in doing. And again, I mean, of course, these are secular practices, which means that they are available to people regardless of their particular religious traditions or beliefs. And so it really is, what is meditation? As I said, meditation is a process of reflection, and to encourage people to reflect on certain ideas. And I mean, I will just flag them this evening, and if you're this afternoon, and if you're interested, I'd be happy to have another conversation with you to detail these. But for example, if we can encourage people to reflect on the nature of interdependence, and that is that how much our lives depend on other people. Our very survival, whether it is in Kashmir or it is in Ukraine or it is in, I don't know where paradise exists in the world. I don't think it does anywhere. I mean, I can see people struggling from in the United States, where we fantasize about, where women's rights to their bodies and abortion have now become law, that you cannot practice those. But so basically, if we begin to recognize that we live in an interdependent world, and so if I like my cup of coffee in the morning, I just have to think about the person who grew the coffee, the number of elements and the number of people that were involved for that coffee to come to my table. The person who grows it and packs it, and it's sent to public transportation or buses or trucks or what have you, to my local vendor, and who sends it to me, then the household help who will cook it for me, make it for me, and the person supplies the milk with it and the sugar, or everything we do, or your students when they come to school, the way they, the teacher who teaches, the education of the teacher, the training of the teacher itself, the school building, the person who built the building. So, we can infinitely explore how many different people make our simplest daily experiences and our very survival possible. I mean, even from the food we eat, to our education, to our health, to our parents, who gave us birth, and their love. So the more we reflect on the infinite interconnectedness of the world and our interdependence, the more kindly it is inevitable that once we recognize that even the so-called enemy has a role in my physical being in some indirect way. So I think that is what will, when it has deeply been assimilated in our consciousness, it can begin to bring about the experience of a universal human family. In fact, we have argued, His Holiness has argued, that it extends beyond a universal human value, beyond human beings. It embraces nature, it embraces animals, and we are dependent on that entire canvas of human reality, human conditions, the conditions on the planet. And the only way is that, in a secular way, is to do some practice, whatever it may be, to quieten the mind, and then to keep reflecting repeatedly on interdependence, because that also really breeds gratitude and compassion, because then we are grateful to people who made all these things possible for us and our very survival. So I think that is the core aspect. And the second one really is that we grasp at ourselves as somehow, and we grasp at others who we are attached to, that as if they are somehow permanent. It's not going to change. So along with interdependence is the recognition that everything changes and the change is inevitable. And because it's impermanent, it's going to experience dissolution. I mean, even the continents, if you look at time, have moved. Continents have changed. Mount Everest has grown taller. The temperature is changing. Our relationships are changing. Someone who was a dear friend suddenly becomes an enemy. People are madly in love and they get married, and life is ecstasy, and hundreds of crores of rupees or dollars or whatever are spent, and suddenly boop, it's changed. So these things that we hang on to with such, whether it is our identities, whether it is our nationalities, or what have you, are all inherently impermanent. It's just a question of time. So recognizing interdependence, impermanence, compassion, and reflecting on those, if enough people were to do it for long enough, I think we'd have a very, very different planet. Okay, I think there's time for one more question. And I too will try and be brief.
Wonderful. So we have Nyanjay joining us from Osmania University in Hyderabad. Can I invite you to share briefly with us? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Hello, hope everyone is doing good and I'm audible to everyone.
Yes.
Actually, first of all, on this occasion, I wanted to thank Mr. Rajiv sir. I was a part of 26 Gurukul program. And also, yes, I was very fortunate to be a part of that group. And I thank you very much, sir. And also, I want to thank our coordinators, Kunsangla, Jemyang and Anukriti. So coming to my reflections on the movie, what I have learned in the whole journey is, from the movie, happiness and joy is not limited or constrained to a single human being or a community, but it is a world phenomena. Like the spread, the awareness which the movie was spreading to the whole world was amazing. And also, whenever a human being is facing with some issue, kind of anger, anxiousness, all these things, we are supposed to replace them with happiness, compassion, all these things, so that we can be a good person in the community.
Okay, well, I have to slightly disagree with you for once. And I think that there is enough scientific evidence and data to suggest that, let's just use the word equanimity instead of happiness. It's a safer word, or joy. And that is that I cannot imagine that people in Ukraine today or, will be somehow happier than the people in Bhutan, for example. I mean, just take two out, so we have to recognize that in the cycles of time and history and circumstance, that different groups of people will face greater challenges in their pursuit of equanimity. And we have to do what we can, without getting into who is right in the Russia-Ukraine war. We have to work towards peace, and we have to direct our energy, give it greater focus to places where there is famine or there is conflict, where the aggravators to suffering are much larger. And so I'm sure that it is easier in certain environments, certainly in the short term and in particular timelines, than for people in others. So we also have to recognize, and I don't want to go into, there has been some very interesting in this conversation between Christianity and Buddhism. And I'm just trying to see if I can find the quote. I can't. But for example, we have this idea of karma, and I think karma is very is misunderstood, because we look at karma as cause and effect in a very singular manner, that I engage in a negative action or a negative deed, and somehow it will lead to a negative consequence for me, right? I mean, I say this because in response to what you have said, is to that how do we respond if we're in Ukraine and in Bhutan, or I mean, I just use Bhutan because that's believed to have the highest happiness index of any communities in the world. And it really, so you can be in a perfectly harmonious, wonderful space and be miserable. And so you'll find that people have a lot of comfort, and things that are challenging and for other people. So you always look, across the fence and say, well, he's got everything, he must be very happy. But that's not always the case. And so obviously, and it has to do with both the external environment, which will be more challenging, and sometimes when it's a temporary one, hopefully, like the war in Ukraine, and in Bhutan. So we cannot be indifferent to the stimulus and the context of the external environment in terms of the challenges people face. And so that really is the core issue. And just to stay with karma, because it is something that's very much a part of our heritage. And that is that, how does karma work? And how does karma operate? It really is that, and it's like meditation. So just like, what we think repeatedly gets imprinted in our consciousness. So similarly, if we are engaged in inverted commas, negative actions with bad motivation, that creates an imprint in our consciousness. And so then that predisposes us to a different kind of response, to a different kind of experience. So the same experience, depending on our mental disposition, can be seen experienced as pleasurable, and someone can experience it as painful. So it is possible through conscious effort to be able to change through meditation or practice, through altruism and compassion, the imprints in our consciousness. And so it is, the approximate quote that, which His Holiness pointed out. His Holiness has done a wonderful commentary on the gospel. And he says he sees resonances of karma, because karma is not, somebody sitting on judgment like a judge and saying, you've done something terrible, now you will experience imprisonment or whatever it is, punishment. It is self-created, it is self-processed, and it is self-manifest. And so he says that, in the gospel, Christ says that you will be judged by my word, not judged, as we often assume, by God in heaven. And so what is the word? And the word is the benchmark. And what is the benchmark? The benchmark is motivation, not action. So there is a fine tuning here of those of you who are interested in Gandhi, where Gandhiji said the means are as important as the ends. So what this tradition really suggests is that, for example, if there is a riot and you are harboring someone of who you need to protect from the riot, maybe a minority person, and the rioters come and say, "Do you have so-and-so in your house?" And you say, "No." No, you've told a lie. But whatever you do is the imprint in your consciousness is dependent on the motivation. So if your motivation has been to protect someone, then actually the imprint is you have manifest a positive expression of that. So I really just want to point out to that it is not a homogeneous context or environment. And we have to we can't always celebrate the difference, because sometimes, when people are suffering, we can't exactly celebrate the fact that they are suffering a far more extreme circumstance than we are. But it's not exclusively the circumstance that determines our experience. But yes, circumstances can make things more difficult and easier, and which is why the emphasis is that there is no time to waste. Death can happen at any time. And from the moment we are born, we are moving to death. And so there is no time to waste. Get on with it. Whatever it is, your practice, your nurturing and training your mind, apologizing to someone who you have wronged, that can happen at any time. And as we've seen that, not long after the film was made, we lost Bishop Desmond Tutu. And somebody who's very young, a child, can suddenly die, and someone who you think is 90 and critically ill lives to be 100. And I was recently reading a report that says that, many of you who are still in schools and colleges, colleges and universities, for us, the average lifespan in India is now sort of early 70s. And it could easily go up. And certainly globally, people could live well into 120, 125. Yet, while that remains the potential, the end could come at any time. I just want to conclude, because I'm afraid this has to conclude. But we're really open to continuing conversations and dialogues such as these, and to encourage you to do them. And our deep gratitude, and certainly mine personally, and with my team, Shilpi and Jamyang and Kunsang and Anukriti, and certainly those of I see Sheetal, and I don't see I only see that many images in my screen. And
thank you, Rajiv bhai.
And others from the other many institutions from Colombo and elsewhere who have helped this possible, and most of all, to all of you. And I just don't say all of you facetiously, because as His Holiness says in somewhere in the film, that the past is the past, and there's nothing we can do about it. And we are we're approaching the how to put it, the climax of our past, and you are the future. And so it's really exciting to be able to have this conversation with you, and to just share some of my perspectives. They're not final, they're not absolute. I'm not enlightened. I still struggle and I still suffer. Thank you for this opportunity for me personally, to share some of my perspectives and experience, with a prayer that they have helped in some way. They've helped me anyway, talking about them. So thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rajiv bhai. Thank you.